These are my grapevines. I have them growing in half wine barrel containers. I also have two other vines that are planted in the ground. Before I go any further, I'd like to mention that all these vines were not properly pruned when they were young. I've never grown grapes before, so I didn't know how to prune them when they were young. And as a result, they aren't growing in a manner that's going to give a maximum production off these vines. I have since learned quite a bit from watching other YouTube videos, but now since I missed the opportunity to correctly prune them early on, I'll have to make do with what I have. Also, these vines were supposed to go into the ground. However, I wound up making some changes, and as a result, due to the limited planting area in my backyard, they had to go in these half wine barrels. It's not the optimum growing environment, but they are doing well. They have really lush green leaves and full growth. If I can get them to set a decent amount of grapes, I'll leave them in the wine barrels. Otherwise, I may need to make some adjustments and find some space in my backyard and plant them in the ground. Okay, now for the ones planted in the ground. This one here is the ruby seedless grape. And the one over here is my flame seedless grape. Both of these vines are about 2.5 years old. I had them growing in pots and decided to plant them in the ground a little over 18.5 months ago. The ruby grapevine on the end has not produced any grapes. However, the flame grapevine is putting out its first set of grapes. All of my grapevines were heavily pruned this past winter while they were dormant. This variety is a fast-growing vine, and it's put on quite a bit of growth and may need to do a little more pruning. But it's pushing out its first set of grapes. Here they are. These are the only two clusters growing on this vine. It's still relatively young and it's only been in the ground for a short time. From research I've done, grapes don't usually put out a good crop until they're about 4 to 5 years old. It's doing well, so perhaps it will do better in a couple of years. Now for my container growing grapes. These three here are not the type of grapes that you find in stores. These are mainly grown for making wine. They are also grown to make jellies and jams. All these vines are about 4 years old. They've been growing in these half barrels for the past 3 years. They're all able to grow in zones 7 through 10. And with the exception of the one on the end, they're self-pollinating. This first one here is my Triumph Muscadine. This vine produced its first grapes 2 years ago. It's never produced a heavy crop. It's only produced about 3 handfuls each season. But this year, for the first time, it's producing way more clusters, way more than I've had ever seen on this vine before. As you can see here, they're all over. I counted over 40 clusters. I'm hoping it will be a good harvest this season. These grapes are really sweet, and as I previously mentioned, they are mainly used to make wine. The skin on these is really tough, and they are not seedless. They have a couple of fairly good sized seeds in them. But the taste is excellent. At least for me it is. These are much sweeter than the types of grapes you find at the grocery stores. Back in early January, I pruned these. Here's what it looked like before. And here's what it looked like after I pruned it. As you can see, it was heavily pruned. I pruned it using what's called a spur pruning. It's the first time that I've ever pruned this vine utilizing this method. I'm really pleased so far with the results, so I believe I'll stick with this method. This vine started to come out of dormancy in mid-March and began to push out the grape clusters in late April. At this stage, it had a good amount of clusters scattered throughout the vine. It still had not leafed out completely. At this point, only a few leaves had developed, but the vine was doing very well. By May, the vine had put on a substantial amount of growth, and the clusters were abundant. They had gotten a little bigger, but had not flowered. The buds you see here should start to flower in about another month or so. The next one you see here is my Terra Scuppernong. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This one also produced its first grapes 2 years ago. It's also never produced a heavy crop. Last season, it only rendered about 3 handfuls of grapes. This year, it appears it's going to set a larger crop. As you can see, it has a good amount of clusters forming. The grapes off this vine are also have a thick skin with seeds. It has a similar taste to that of the Triumph grape. It's very sweet and excellent flavor. The size of these grapes are about average, similar to what you find at the grocery stores. This one was also pruned in early January using the spur method. Here's what it looked like after pruning. The leaves you see here on the bottom are from a volunteer vine. I left it alone. I'll probably transplant it next season. This vine started to come out of dormancy in early March and began to produce its first grape cluster in late March. By late April, it had put on a good amount of growth. It also put out a good amount of clusters. It's so far is putting out quite a bit, well over 25 or 30, which is more than the previous years. This next one is the Summit Muscadine. It produced its first harvest 2 years ago. It produced less than the Triumph or the Terra vine. In the past 2 seasons, it's only produced about 3 to 4 handfuls of grapes. I believe it's producing less grapes because it requires a pollinator. The Triumph is listed as the best pollinator. However, they don't flower simultaneously. The Triumph begins to flower about 4 to 6 weeks before. So by the time the Summit starts to flower, the Triumph is towards the end of its flowering cycle. This one was also spur pruned. Here's what it looked like before it was pruned. Here's what it looked like after. This last one here is a black seedless variety. I bought this one back in November of 2017. So it's about 4.5 years old. This vine was planted in the wine barrel about 2 years ago. It has not produced any clusters in previous years, and it appears that this year it won't produce any again. Last year it developed what I originally thought was red blotch disease. I did some research and found that there's really no treatment for this disease, in which the leaves develop red spots and they eventually cause the leaves to dry up and fall off. It also impacts the fruit production and quality of the grapes. The best remedy is really just to replace the vine. This past winter, I sprayed it while it was dormant with some copper fungi and also some neem oil. So far this year, I have not seen any infected leaves, so it appears that it may have been some other issue and not the red blotch disease. I'll continue to monitor. If I see it flare up again, I'll likely replace this vine. Okay, hopefully the spur pruning will produce a bigger grape harvest this season. I'll be sure to post a follow-up video once some of the grapes mature off these vines. The next video will probably be on this Hass avocado. I previously posted a video on this one when it was getting ready to flower. I wanted to post a follow-up video as soon as it stopped dropping fruit and started to set some. I've been clearing the drop fruit off the ground daily. Last couple of days there hasn't been too many on the ground, so I might keep most of the ones you see here. Well, that'll be it for now. I hope you enjoyed watching. If so, please give this video a thumbs up and please consider subscribing to my channel. Until next video, stay safe, grow your own, and thank you for watching.